Shalom and welcome to Practical Spirituality here with HTV. And so today's subject is about personal responsibility when it comes to the financial world, when it comes to how people interact with the subject of money, finances. You know, how do we react with all that? How do we interact with all that? So our personal responsibility is the answer to the age-old question of which kind of society is the appropriate one when it comes to caring for the bottom of the hierarchy. You know, in every single hierarchy, there's nothing you can do. There's always going to be people at the bottom. Like, for example, I'm at the bottom of the math hierarchy, you know. And I'm okay with that, you know. It's not a big deal for me. On the financial hierarchy, no matter what you do, unless you give everyone the same amount of money, you know, people are going to be on different levels of that hierarchy. In every skill set, in every situation, in IQ, I mean, just human brains are you know, not every single brain's the same, and there's a hierarchy there. But the question that we're dealing with here is, how do we deal with the actual bottom? What do we do when people are at the bottom of a hierarchy? And especially when it comes to financially, because that's getting down to the survival level. Like, how do you survive? You know, if you're at the bottom of the hierarchy financially, I mean, I think it's 83, anyone 83 and under, 84 and under, I don't remember, in IQ can't even serve in the US military because there's nothing you can do with a person like that. And meanwhile, you know, what do we do? Because they could be, you know, the breadwinner or loser in this case of their family, and they need taken care of. So how do we take care of these people? How do we take care of people who don't have and don't even have the ability to get? Some of them, and some do, and they have other issues of why they're not doing well. So the biggest two players in this is communism, or, you know, that's an extreme version of socialism, meaning we're gonna take care of the poor via socialism, and the other is capitalism, and these are two options. So let's discuss both. First, socialism. There we rely on the government to make sure that that there's at least basic services for everybody, and that the have-nots, or the people at the bottom of any hierarchy, will survive. Israel, where I live, happens to be a very I'm getting a good evening from India, who listened to one of my lectures, named Asim Yusuf. How you doing, Asim Yusuf from India? Welcome. Nice to have you. Anyway, how do you survive financially? How do we take care of them? So I was saying in Israel, so medical and education's covered. And so that means that it doesn't matter where you are on the social or financial hierarchy. You're going to be medically cared for well, and also educationally, you can you know, really do, you know, you can just, there's no ceiling. You can just keep rising, and that will be on the government. The most extreme version of that kind of socialist thing is that we're just going to take away everyone's private ability to earn, and that's called communism. And we're going to, you know, everyone will work, but the wealth will be spread out evenly amongst everybody. And there's no such thing as privilege, but that doesn't make any sense either, because that denies natural hierarchies, and it will ruin the competence hierarchy, which is the most important one around. Is That's how anything progresses, is the more competent are obviously going to rise. And you want that kind of thing. You want surgeons, and you want physicists and engineers, building our buildings. You want the top of the hierarchy building the 100-story tower, especially in a California earthquake zone or something. Like, we want the top physicists involved with that. And so competence hierarchies, first of all, they're natural, and they're in every single, there's nowhere you can look where you're not going to see it. And so to strip away privilege just leads to the death of, Stalinism, and just to try to get rid of that competence is it's just a joke. All that would do is cause death and destruction in the world, and that's exactly what happened. More people died under Stalin than World War II. Now, the interesting thing is that what you're doing there is you're expecting the government to take care of the poor. Now, what's the alternative? So the most famous alternative has been capitalism. And capitalism, guess what? Relies on the government to take care of the poor. It's the same exact thing. You rely on the government for that. And what does that mean? That means that here we try to promote wealth amongst individuals, and then we tax the wealthy, and then the money of the wealthy, or the money of those companies, or whatever the initiatives that those individuals have, goes to the taxes, and then the government takes care of the poor. Now, in the argument of which one's right, the answer is that we don't know. I mean, they're both right. You got to take care of the poor, and there should be equality of wealth, and meaning everyone should have at least a basic amount of money, and so that they can survive, and no matter who they are and where they stand on any hierarchy, when the communists fell, the capitalists thought they won. They didn't win. They just fell. They're falling later, meaning they beat them as far as how long they could float. But what we're seeing and what we've always seen and grown up with is that there's a rot that takes place in the capitalist system of the inner city, and the have-nots are not cared for by the government in the end, and there isn't a proper care of them, and of course, which leads to the way things fester and rot and mold in those areas, and eventually leads to people growing up in there angry, and crime becomes the mode of survival. Great bitterness, as we have seen during these riots over the death of George Floyd. There's been these massive riots, but there's like the protesters are probably they're angry people, and probably many of them are bitter and angry over this whole the breakdown of expecting government to take care of the poor, and but then there's also been the violence and the looting and the arson and various other activities that are again indicative of anger and resentment and intense poverty that's led to a life of crime, which people have been opportunistic about, since the cops are greatly outnumbered right now. How does Judaism look at this? I mean, Judaism's got a good we've got a pretty good 3,300 year run now, and how do we look at this? How does the Jewish people look at the spread of wealth? The answer is that we basically don't rely on government at all to take care of everybody. There's no relying on the government for that. First of all, you have the tithes that we give to the poor. So every individual gives certain tithes to the poor, as well as taking care of the Levitical community. Although the Levites are not expected, they can make their own money, but have they're not expected to work. They're taken care of by the other 11 tribes of Israel. We take care of the priesthood. That's the Levitical body, which is Kohanim and Levites. So we take care of them, but also we take care of the poor. And there are two commandments in the Torah regarding poor people. One is it's a thou shalt and thou shalt not. The thou shalt is you should give according to your ability to give, and thou shalt not is you shall not say no if someone asks you. Now, a lot of people don't even know about that commandment. People think, no. So people think saying no is like they're right. You know, it'd be like un-American to not be able to say no. So it turns out that every time you've been able to give, but you said no, you broke one of the Torah commandments, which is thou shalt not withhold charity, tzedakah, if you can. By the way, let's go into the word tzedakah. The word tzedakah has to do with the scales, with what you'd call equality, and in this case, tzedakah means equality of wealth. That see, the word charity sounds like the haves give to the have-nots, so it's like you're doing someone a favor. Whereas the word tzedakah implies tzedek, implies doing the right thing here. It's the word tzedek means justice, like doing what's just. And to realize that, yeah, you worked hard because you run some company, or you work hard because you make a wage or whatever. You know, that's wonderful that you made that money, but we believe God made that money through us, meaning we move our hands around. He lets us pretend we do something during the week. We're like puppets. Like God just lets us move our bodies around and move our minds around, and such that we can make a living. And the Torah is telling us from the word tzedakah that we are to even out the scales. Meaning, if you got a lot of money, so you're supposed to distribute that personally. But there's no government. There's no government at all in that. No government. And you see that when you have a tzedakah, when tzedakah is a value, and again, tzedakah means for those who are not Hebrew speakers, that means charity. But as I said, it doesn't exactly mean charity. It means feeling a sense that God gave you the money he gave you, and that someone else is lacking is also from God, and God's watching you and is commanding you to take care of others and to make sure that you don't say no while taking care of others. We just finished Shavuos, the Shavuos holiday, and in the Shavuos holiday, the famous story that's read is the book of Ruth. And in the book of Ruth, the whole story begins with a very, very wealthy, sagely man who says, wow, there's a huge famine in Israel and people are already like acting pretty nuts. So why don't we just get out of here? And he took his wife and two sons to Moab, the Moabite country, Moab, and he subsequently he dies, his kids die, and but he should have. His job was to give out the money, like his job, because he was thinking like they're just I'm not gonna have any money left, he was very wealthy, and he's like, I'm not going to have any money if I give it out during a famine, and lo and behold, he decides to leave and save his wealth and himself, perhaps. I don't know if they were criminals at the time, but he just winds up dying, and his wealth is gone. His wife, in the end, with her two daughters-in-laws, after her sons died, her name was Naomi, and they were barefoot. I mean, they walked back to Israel barefoot, Naomi and Ruth, and wound up, just begging. So anyway, the um, the Shell asked a question from America. Are you perceived it as a job to take care of the poor? Oh, the word job, I guess he was focusing on that it's a job. Anyway, so by the way, rabbinically, it's also important to note that that because you just have to give what you can, so they did, the rabbis did make a minimum. The minimum was 10%. So you have to, after taxes, after everything, like your actual take, you have to take 10% off of that and give it to people of your choice, which is also unique in Judaism because generally charity goes to the church if you're doing the 10% thing in the religions. But in Judaism, you give the 10% to who you choose because Judaism recognizes that don't rely on someone else to do this, including your synagogue or church or anything like that. You take care of this. You make sure everyone's eating. You look, and also look a poor person or financially person in the eyes when you hand it to them and say, you and I are one. Like, this could have been me. The fact that this is you, we're the same, like could it be you giving to me right now? Maybe you are giving to me because maybe the mitzvah, maybe the fulfillment of this commandment is a greater charity to me than it is to you, the money that you're receiving. And it's anyway, but that's taking the personal care and the recognition that it's our responsibility to take care of one another. The world will probably never be right until people sense this responsibility of taking care of one another. It's the cities in the U.S. have been on fire, and now it's spreading to other countries. But no one seems to get the point. No one seems to get it. That it's our responsibility. No one notices. How they don't notice. But you'll see in certain communities, like there's no homeless. Like I live in a particularly financially poor community here in Jerusalem, and where people really have nothing. I would say the majority of my neighbors go into Shabbat every week without an extra 10 shekels in their house, which is about $2. I don't believe many of them have an extra 10 shekels in their house when they're celebrating Sabbath with like as if they're the richest people in the world. But there's just no money, but there's no homelessness, and no one starves. And the community here is highly supportive of one another. Everyone's taken care of. There's no hunger, and there is no homelessness here. There's no homeless problem here in Israel. And it's not because of the government. It's not because Israel has socialized medicine and education. That's not why. The reason why is because there's a recognition that it's up to us to take care of one another, that it's our job, that someone comes to your door, that's you. He's you, you're him. We're connected, and we sense the responsibility, and we sense the blessing of that which God has given us. We sense that blessing and the responsibility that it bears. It comes with responsibility that we have to take care of each other. I forgot to mention that wealthier people give more than 10%. It's on a scale up to 20, so 10 to 20. 10 is for people who don't have much money. So, you got $100 for a job, give 10. Okay? But if you're getting $100,000 a job, so give 15%, give more. And if you can afford more, you give more. But the cutoff is 20%. Because our sages determined that if someone gave more than 20%, they're eventually going to wind up poor as well. So not to get beyond 20, although there's a unique situation where someone is what's called an Osher Muflag, which means a extremely wealthy, um, extremely wealthy person, they're allowed to give as much as they want because they're already like set for life. They got just an interest in what they have in investments. It would pay for them, their kids, their grandkids. That's money that's sticking around, and so they're allowed to give as much as they want. The reason I'm pausing so long is I'm considering how it is we're going to impress this upon the world, because much of the world's been in emergency mode in the last week, since the situation with the murder of that in Minneapolis by that police officer. The world's hemorrhaging, and no one's thinking about this approach. Also, with the coronavirus, many people have lost their jobs. The highest unemployment rate in America, apparently, since the Great Depression earlier last century, and it's likely the same in many countries throughout the world. And so we're once again, we're expecting the government with a stimulus package to take care of everybody. What about you take care of some people? What if you take what you got and take care of some people? So many people will die with their wealth. So many people will, so many people will be buried with their wealth. Meaning, I'm using a pun, like literally buried with their wealth. They didn't share it, and it buried them ultimately. And we have to share. This touches me extra deep because when I'm watching these riots, I'm thinking of my namesake, because Martin Luther King passed away 3 days before I was born, and my parents, being nice liberal Jews in the late 1960s, 1968, they named me. My English name is John Martin, John after my mother's brother, and Martin after Martin Luther King. So I'm actually a Hasidic rabbi named after a Black minister, civil rights leader. And so it's always been in my blood, like from the earliest days. I remember when my father, my father's a sports fanatic, and he used to show up to the games when we went to the Rams, the LA Rams, many years ago. We're in the LA Coliseum. So where do you park? So we'd park on the lawns of the inner city, downtown, poor community there. We would park on their lawns. So there was one particular lawn where we parked most times, and the Black man whose lawn it was, I suppose, but my father would pull up his Cadillac, and the guy wanted $10 a car. And my father was like the quintessential dealer, so like he had a deal all the time, and so my father told him like $8, and the guy's like, $10, man, I'm parking cars on my lawn just to feed the family, $10. My father would be like, $9. Anyway, they would get in a whole fight, and either my dad would be upset if he gave 10, or the guy would be upset if he wound up accepting 9. So what I learned as a little kid was always go to the ball game with $1. Always bring $1, because they tend to always get to 9 and 10. And so I always went with $1. And the first time when my father was arguing with him, I opened the back window. I was a little kid. I was like 6, maybe 5 or 6, 7. So I waved the $1 outside the window to him, winking at him like, this is for you, bro. Just take the $9, make my dad happy. And my dad was like the capitalist of all capitalists. He's like Donald Trump incarnate. And he had this kind of Marxist son who's finally found his balance in in the Torah world, where I learned about how it's actually supposed to go, money. And anyway, so after a while, it just became a ceremony we went through where my dad would argue a bit, give him the $9, and then when we got out of the car, my dad would turn towards the Coliseum and I would turn around and hand, we called him Rasta. He had a bunch of dreadlocks. And so I would hand Rasta the buck. And he taught me a really cool handshake. One time my father looked back wondering where I was. I guess he was saying something to me and he saw I wasn't there. He sees me in a full-on bros handshake with Rasta over there. Okay, everybody. So let's count carefully to share the blessings that we get financially. Make sure we're sharing it, and let's all come up with ideas how we can impress this upon the world. Let's take all the money away from the government, meaning the money that's supposed to go to the poor. Like, let's figure out what is that amount, and let's take care of the poor ourselves. Let's deal with people lacking finances. Let's take care of them on our own, the way we do it here in Jerusalem. And I think the whole world could learn this lesson and pay less taxes and enjoy much more blessings in our lives, that we take care of it ourselves. What a way to live. What a blessing to live life that way. Anyway, blessings to everyone. Please click and hit all the different buzzers and whistles, follow, share, and subscribe, whatever it is. Keep sending this along, and thanks for watching, everyone on YouTube. Please subscribe to my channel, join my club, RabbiYomTov.com, and also everyone watching on Torah Anytime. What an incredible organization. Keep up the great work. HTV, keep it going. All the best. Blessings.